The living gymnosperms are widely distributed in the cold climates where snow and rain is very common. So water is very easily available for the gymnosperms. The only native gymnosperm which thrives in warmer areas are the cycads, and these cycads are a small group of gymnosperms with palm-like leaves. In India, mostly the conifers like the pine, cedar, or cypress thrive well in hilly areas, whereas gymnosperms, except these cycads, some of the other varieties or wild varieties are even found in southern parts of our country. These cycads have a very high ornamental value as they look very beautiful. So we will be discussing a little bit about the gymnosperms. Gymnosperms are group of plants which produce seeds that are naked, and the term itself in Greek means naked seeds. The plants with naked seeds are called as gymnosperms. You can see the entire cone which is visible, and this is it is visible in this way, and that's why it is a gymnosperm. Now, when these plants they show the growth of the or they grow the cone or stalk, the shape is quite contrasting or is quite different from the normal angiosperm. In the angiosperms, the structure is quite different, whereas in gymnosperm, the structure is different. The basic difference lies in the covering. Here, the seeds are not covered with an outer pericarp, whereas in case of angiosperms, we see that the seeds are covered inside the fruit. There, there are few general characteristics of these gymnosperms. The first one is they do not produce flowers. The seeds are not formed inside a fruit, and that's why they are naked. They are found in colder regions like the areas where there is snowfall or continuous rain. The leaf is needle like or palm like in case of the gymnosperm. They are perennial or at times woody. There are small trees and bushes present, or the structure is sometimes like a tree or like a bush. They are not well differentiated into ovary, style, and stigma. When here they refers to the female gametophyte, it is not well differentiated into ovary, style, or stigma. Since stigma is absent, they are pollinated directly by the wind. The male gametophyte produces two gametes, but only one of them is functional. They form cones with reproductive structures, and these seeds contain endosperm that stores food for the growth and development of the plant. These plants are vascular, and as because the vascular system is well developed in them, the transportation of nutrients and water takes place with the help of xylem and phloem. Xylem does not have vessels, and phloem has no companion cells and sieve tubes. So this is very important. Here, xylem is lacking the presence of vessels, and if we think about the pteridophytes, there was only presence of tracheids in case of their vascular system, or they had only xylems, tracheids present in them for the transportation of water. So little higher development as compared to the vascular system we can see in case of the gymnosperms. Now the reproduction in gymnosperms, you can see the structure very well. The male cone, how does it look? And when it matures, it looks like this. Um, Whereas the young cones, they are green in color and they cannot be well differentiated. Whereas the female cones are have woody texture and have presence of microsporophylls, or I should say megasporophylls. Megasporangium is present and megasporophylls are there in case of ovules, and these ovules are uh, have woody texture. So gymnosperms reproduce with an alternation of generation, meaning the reproductive cycle has both haploid as well as diploid phases. As in other vascular plants, gymnosperms have a sporophyte dominant life cycle. So again, the haploid gametophytic stage is dominant, and diploid multicellular stage is there is for a shorter duration of time. This gametophyte phase is relatively short or short-lived, whereas the sporophytic phase is long-lived. In the gametophytic phase, we see that the cones and strobili they appear, whereas when the plant is when the male and female gametes are formed, then again the diploid phase it starts, because the female gamete or the cone will get fertilized, and as soon as it gets fertilized it breaks off from the plant body, and then after it is capable of giving rise to the next plant. The female ovulate cone or megasporophyll bear the megasporangium diploid cells, which undergo meiosis to produce four haploid spores. Of these haploid spores, only one survives as the megaspore, whereas this surviving megaspore then, with the help of mitosis, develops into a female gametophyte. Within the female gametophyte, there is an egg and an endosperm mother cell, and the endosperm mother cell creates the endosperm, which feeds the embryo. The male cones are called microsporophylls. Micro means they are small in size, they are small, spongy, and leaf like organs which bears the microsporangium, and this microsporangium contains the male microspores. We are aware the size is quite small in case of them, and after meiosis, they generate male gametes or male gametophyte or the pollen. These pollen grains contain the pollen tube cell and the generative cell, like normal angiosperms and two sperms, although one of it dies because it will help in formation of the tube cell. So when the pollen reaches the egg cell, either by wind or by animal through pollination, the pollen grain it releases the single sperm. Just one of the sperm will be released, and that the nuclei of that sperm will fuse with the female, and it will result in the formation of a zygote. The endosperm, haploid nutritional tissue, is capable of providing nutrition like a mother cell to the developing zygote, and this zygote develops into the seed. The seed appears as with the presence of scales. You can see the bract scales over here. Each of the ovules are represented by green structures, and the central axis is represented by the inside woody texture. You can see some lines drawn, those are the central axis. Ovuliferous scales are there at the corners, and ovule is also present. Now the seeds appear as the scales. Each of the scale is a seed which are visible on the cones of the gymnosperms. These scales are then dispersed to form a new sapling sporophyte, which grows into a mature sporophyte, and the cycle continues. The female cones are larger and woodier than the male cones, and they are usually positioned higher upon the tree. Like in this diagram, you can see at the female cone is present at much higher proximity as compared to the male cone. Although in dioecious species like cycas, the male and female cones are born on separate trees. So that is in case of cycas. You will see palm-like leaf structure. Inside the leaf structure, you will see that in the center, either there is presence of male plant or male gametophyte or the female gametophyte. So we will be discussing a little bit about the life cycle of Pinus. Let's start with the gymnosperms or the Pinus, life cycle of Pinus. The gymnosperms are basically heterosporous. That is, they are capable of producing two different kinds of spores, the male microspore and the female megaspore. The spores are born inside the sporangia. Sporangia are globular structures which bear these spores. The two types of sporangia are born on special leaf-like structures called the sporophylls. Now, these microsporangia are born on microsporophylls. These microsporophylls contain the microsporangia or the pollen sacs, and are born on microsporophylls. Whereas in the megasporangia, we see that the ovules are born on megasporophylls. So these sporophylls are usually aggregated in the form of compact structures called the cones. So the first cone structure, which is of a female, is actually a sporophyll, and it is known as strobili as well. The cones are generally unisexual, like the female or the male cones, and they are either called as microsporangiate in case of male cones or megasporangiate in case of the female spores. The male cones are short-lived, whereas the female cones, they are long-lived. They live for 1 year, 2 year, until and unless they become ripened and are capable of fertilization. The microsporangium produces numerous light pollen grains, and and the pollination in case of the pinus is with the help of either wind or sometimes some bats also help in the pollination purpose. Some of the pollen grains come in direct contact with the micropylar end of the ovules and reach up to the nucellus. The ovules remain exposed on the microsporophyll. We have seen the structure over here. You can see the ovules are exposed, and as soon as the ovules come in contact with the pollen grain or the pollen tube, they allow the pollen tube germination over it, and only one of the male gamete it reaches and undergoes fertilization. The pollen tube reaches up to the egg cell and releases both the male gametes. One of the male gamete fertilizes the egg, forming the diploid zygote, and this fertilization occurs by the male gamete is carried to the archegonia through the pollen tube in case of most of the gymnosperms. Whereas here as well, in case of Pinus also, we see the same same process. Once the fertilization has occurred, the diploid zygote develops into an embryo, and while it is still enclosed within the ovule, and the ovule becomes a seed. This seed, the wall of the ovule becomes the seed coat. During the seed development, the food-laden tissue of the female gametophyte, which is the endosperm, supplies nutrients to the developing embryo. And for the growth of the embryo also, the seedling is produced during this process. Or after the growth of the seed, seedling will be, or growth of the embryo, the seedling will be formed. The nutrients are drawn from the parent plant, to which the developing seed is actually attached. Now, the young sporophyte will germinate after this, and this young sporophyte or the seeds of the gymnosperm do not occur inside the fruit because they are naked seeds. And this ripe or dry seeds are shed from the plant as megasporophyll. The ripe and dry seeds are, or these seeds are capable of giving rise to the young sporophyte in the form of active, in the form of dormant or inactive state of embryo embedded with the endosperm or endosperm. So the seeds are protected with the seed coat, and these seeds are capable of giving rise to the next generation of the plant. In case of most of the conifers like this Pinus, we see the similar kind of life cycle. Every time the sporophyte gives rise to the next plant. Now, at times, there is also a chance that we will find that certain peculiar characteristics of the plants are seen. Like most of the times, it is found that once this fertilization has occurred, the cone it falls off from the plant and it just crawls towards the corner of the, or towards, it crawls downhill, reaches any place where it comes in contact with soil and starts germinating. Because if you have seen a cone, you can see that outer woody structure is intact in the cones. And after, like, if you have ever encountered the cone, and if you take that entire cone and keep it in your house for some time, you will see that all the woody structures, they fall off. The reason for that is that the fertilization has occurred, and that's why that cone had fallen off, and you got an access to the cone. Now the cone's intention is to let the seed get the soil so that it can germinate into a sporophyte, and that's why it sheds off all the wooden scales. These all ovuliferous scales are removed off, and only the seed is left, and that seed can give rise to the next sporophyte. So this is all about the life cycle of a typical pinus. You could, I hope, very well understand the entire process. How is it taking place? Same structure, but here we are looking into um, much literal diagram where the things have been, or the different structures have been collected from actual spores. So first we will look into the male cone. You all have seen male cones everywhere surround in your surrounding. They are very common in our area. The Christmas tree or most of the pinus plants around our surrounding, they all have these male cones over it. Female cones are also there. If you pay little attention, you can very well understand how do they look like. And the female cones, after fertilization, they look like mature female cones, and these are the cones which are found while walking through the hilly areas. You will see that these cones are lying in the corner of the street or the pavement, and those cones are already fertilized, and each of these scales, ovuliferous scales, will be removed so that the seed is exposed. This seed is capable of germinating into a seedling, and this seedling is the sporophyte. A mature needle is just shown over here. This is the small sporophytic stage. Rest all is diploid. Now the economic importance of gymnosperms is widespread. You can see this cone, and here the cone is already fertilized and it is on the verge of getting separated from this tree. I hope you can now remember that where have you seen this structure before. Anyways, so the first is the ornamental use of this plant. Many gymnosperms, like the Cycas, Thuja, um, Cryptomeria, are usually cultivated in gardens as they are such beautiful plants, and they have very high floral decorative values. They are source of hardwood. Most of the time, pine and most of the gymnosperms, they have presence of this, both the types of wood, the softwood as well as the hardwood, like hemlock or yew, are great light colored or straight grained white weighted softwood varieties, and these wood varieties are used for timber producing things or for making building material, like the, yes, most of the building material is made, sometimes furnitures are made with the help of spruce, larch or hemlock or pine, these kind of gymnosperms. Even paper pulp and sometimes fuel, pencils, they all are made with the help of these plants. Some of the gymnosperms are edible, like the stems and seeds of cycads, like sago starch. They have high quantity of sago starch, and when the seeds are consumed, these seeds of like pinus can be consumed as dry fruits, and the dry fruit of pinus is said as, or it is known as, chilgoza. I know it's a weird name, but it's chilgoza. It is used as a dry fruit. Now the medicinal value, ephedra yields an alkaloid called ephedrine, and this ephedrine is used for treatment of cough, asthma, or bronchitis. Cycas produces a gum, and it is used for treatment of tumors. So both the Cycas varieties, Circinalis as well as Rumfi, they can be used for treatment of tumors. Taxol is an anti-cancer drug, and it is extracted from Taxus. It is also a very important medicinal plant. Taxus, Taxus. Raisins are semi-fluid substances which are secreted from the ducts or cavities or even canals of coniferous trees. The raisins are complex products of essential oils, sometimes terpenes, even raisins and esters. They are commercially extracted from the plants in the form of fluid. Later on, they are hardened and evaporated to form oils. So, these oils can be used for varnishes or waterproof paints or for sealing the wax. So, various uses are there for these reasons. Like copal, it is obtained from agathis, and it is a very important source of this copal. Even rosin is obtained as a residue after distillation of pine turpine, so it is important. Similarly, Canada balsam is a kind of turpentine, and it is obtained from Abies balsamea. Amber is obtained from Pinus, and it is used to build uh, certain ornaments or sometimes cigar holders. Even some beads are made in order to make jewelry. Tannins are complex phenolic substances, and they are obtained from the bark of Sugo candensis. So, in this way, tannins are also very important because they are helping in, they are very helpful for the mankind. And last one is for the purpose of making flavoring agents or for using as perfumes. So gymnosperms are used in both these cases. So these are some of the important economic importance in case of gymnosperms, and they play a very important role in the life of human beings. Some of the times these conifers they possesses special ducts filled with aromatic or antiseptic or even sticky semi-solid substances, and these are at times very inflammable, highly inflammable, and they are the reason for forest fires at times. Even at times, you have seen that there is no termite attack in some of the woods. Those woods are extracted from these plants, from these um, gymnosperms. So, in this way, gymnosperms serve as one of the most important plants of the plant kingdom or group of plants of the plant kingdom, and we can very well understand that they are a level higher or a little more developed as compared to the pteridophytes in case of the vascular system and even the living habitat condition. These are having proper body division, or the plant's body can be very well divided into root, stem and leaves, and they are present in various climatic conditions.